Sick and tired of violence in the name of religion? Yes, I am sure we all are. But where does that violence stem from? We started by looking back to the foundation of Judaism, the Torah. Our tradition teaches us that these 5 books of Moses, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, were dictated to Moses by God. Throughout these books, we read the early history of the Jewish people, and as it unfolds, we read examples of a harsh, judging God who metes out justice with a firm and sometimes violent hand. We watch as Abraham binds his son Isaac and raises his knife, prepared to sacrifice his only son, as God has asked. God intervenes, and from this pivotal moment forward, we understand that God forbids human sacrifice, a practice that was known to other cultures and nations at that time. We read that sins against gods are punished summarily, sometimes collectively, often seemingly irrationally. This is not a God with whom one fools around. Karen Armstrong called this God brutal, partial to his chosen people, that is, to that chosen people, and murderous. Violence in the name of religion, violence by the hand of God, violence in obedience to God. It was a harsh time, and we are presented with a God for that time, tribal and anthropomorphized. The main method of petition or praise or animals or thanks was animal sacrifice in the temple in Jerusalem. But when we were dispersed from there about 70 CE and had to find a new way to pray, everything changed.
Fortunately, our story did not stop there. However harsh and judgmental were these stories and practices, there is more to our relationship with the divine. God is also described as compassionate, gracious, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness. The central idea of the Torah lies in the center of Leviticus, the middle book. Love your neighbor as yourself. Hillel paraphrased the Torah when he said, "What is hateful to you, do not do to another." That is the whole Torah. All the rest is commentary. Now, go and learn the commentary. In Judaism, even our harsh texts are open for debate and interpretation of fairness. Although we read of justice exacting an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, since at least the 12th century, Maimonides, for one, said that among other things we should read that phrase as demanding that the punishment simply fit the crime. Not even the most observant, quote, Torah Jew, or observant Jews, would ever advocate that we stone adulterers to death, let alone all the other sinners censured by Jewish law, Sabbath profaners, eaters of non-kosher foods, and many others. And this is our point. Our religion and our concept of God has evolved, and as a people, we have too. We see ourselves as in a partnership with God. We embrace the concept of tikkun olam, or repair of the world. This expresses the idea that God created the world, but that the world is not yet shalem, or whole. As God's partners, it is our social responsibility to work both as individuals and as a community to complete the task that God began at creation.
In Jewish writing, there is a connection between the two obligations of peace and justice. The commandment to create a world based on tzedek, or justice, envisions a time when there is no poverty or prejudice. To put an end to violence in the name of religion, we must recognize and embrace our common humanity and our obligations to one another and to the entirety of creation. True peace cannot exist unless we build a world based on justice. And true justice cannot exist until we work for peace. If we look hard enough, there are religious texts that can be used to justify anything, good or bad. It is easier to follow the good if we are lucky enough to be well-fed and not living in fear and having decent lives. There are people who, because of poverty or ignorance or disenfranchisement, are susceptible to teachings that emphasize the superiority of their faith, or that God's ends justify any means. We must guard against this. We need to educate ourselves and each other about the highest ideals to which our traditions would have us aspire. We must be absolute in our conviction that violence is never justified in the name of religion. And that is why interfaith and intrafaith, as we are, dialogue are so important, now more than ever. We are all in this together. We will survive or perish together. We have an ethical Jewish tradition. One of the most famous and oft-cited biblical phrases is tzedek, tzedek tirdav, justice, justice shall you pursue. A pursuit of justice can bring an end to violence in the name of religion. When the vocal majorities of all faiths are truly sick and tired of violence in the name of religion, that day will come.